everyone, and welcome to another episode of Creating Space. Actually, this is our first episode of Season 3 of Creating Space, so thank you for tuning in. Please like this podcast, subscribe, and share it with others. And our goal in this podcast is to create space for compelling conversations, for complex conversations as it relates to following Jesus. So thanks for joining in. If you have any questions or subjects you would like to hear us talk about or discuss on the podcast, please send me an email at scottlackie@newstorybuffalo.com. We will put some stuff together or invite different scholars and experts on to discuss whatever it is on your heart. So send those questions to me at scottlackie@newstorybuffalo.com. I'm really excited today because we have a special guest to launch Season 3 of Creating Space. We have Dr. Carmen Joy Imes on this episode of Creating Space. She is a PhD in biblical theology from Wheaton. It was a focus in Old Testament. She's an associate professor of Old Testament at Biola University, the author of Bearing God's Name, Being God's Image, and the book we are discussing today, Becoming God's Family, Why the Church Still Matters. Dr. Imes, thank you for being on this episode of Creating Space.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it is a true pleasure to have you on, to learn from you. I've read your books. I love them. I actually used your book, Being God's Image, to shape a sermon series, about a year and a half ago now at our church. And our word for the year at our church is family. So when I found out you were releasing this book, I already had Joseph Hellerman's book, which you referenced here a couple times. And then I was like, Dr. Imes' book, this is going to be great. So thank you for writing this book. It's perfect time for our church.
Oh, excellent. I did it just for you, Scott.
Oh, hey, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that.
I love it when it works out that way.
just for us, all that work just for us. Maybe we'll try to bring you up to Buffalo sometime, and so everyone can get to meet you. But
I've never been. That'd be fun.
Yeah, well, you were, I think you were in Erie, PA, not too
It
long.
was.
And I thought, maybe we could find a way to get you to Buffalo. It's funny. There's a local radio ad here in Buffalo, and it's for Erie, and it has these kids talking in the car to their parents about how they don't want to go to Disney World because the mouse is blasé, and they want to go to Erie, PA. It's this whole advertisement for the excitement of Erie, PA.
That's
So,
hilarious.
did you experience the Disney level excitement of Erie, PA when you were there?
You know, to me, Disney does a lot of things with excellence, but basically Disneyland is an expensive way to stand in line for long hours. And I much more enjoyed my time in Erie because I was hanging out with people who are in college ministry, and we were talking about how to reach people with the gospel. And that's way more fun than Disneyland, if you ask me.
Hey, well, then there's another plug for Erie, PA for anybody
Make it
listening.
into a commercial.
Awesome.
It was beautiful.
Awesome. Well, yeah, come out to the Northeast more often. You're at Biola right now, so you're in Southern California, right?
Yep. I will be in Pittsburgh in February. So I am coming out that direction again, and I'll be in Boston next week.
Yeah, Boston for SBL and what will you be doing in Pittsburgh?
I'm speaking at Jubilee, which is an annual conference for college ministries associated with the CCO.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Yep.
Well, go find Dr. Imes at Jubilee if you're going to be there. So, love that you're traveling out this way. Let's jump into the book today. Becoming God's Family, Why the Church Still Matters. So, after writing Bearing God's Name and Being God's Image, what led you to this, Becoming God's Family?
I think I was starting to realize how deeply individualistic we are, that we bring that rugged individualism even into our concept of church. And we just think, I believe, like the important thing is that I believe the right thing so that I can go to heaven when I die. And I don't really need an institution. It's kind of optional. And really what I want is to just know I'm in the right spot, but it's really none of anyone else's business. What my religious views are. And I was realizing, I realized this very clearly, sitting across the campfire from one of my extended family members who said, "Oh yeah, I still believe all that stuff in the Bible. I just don't need to go to church. I don't want anybody telling me what to do." And I realized, it's not obvious anymore why we go to church and that we need to belong to each other. And I feel like especially after COVID, where our routines of church attendance were disrupted,
Mhm.
there are many people who are like, I don't know that I really need to go back. I don't know that I'm missing anything." And so I wrote the book to make the case for why we should go back,
Mm.
why we should stay connected to the church. And I'm hoping that it will help people re-engage who have left for various reasons, and help. I hope it helps people who have one foot out the door saying, "Give me one good reason to stay." People who are experiencing disillusionment or just kind of a blasé feeling about church. And I hope that it helps pastors and church leaders to better articulate why we're even gathering and what we should be about.
Yeah, that's good. I think, well, at least from my view, as a pastor, I think you've made that connection, and I'm so glad you've made that connection for people because I also think there's a level of, yes, we wanna connect with people who've left or people who have one foot out the door, but also people who are there every Sunday, getting them to see that there's more here.
Yeah.
There's more to be experienced. There's more, uh to be involved with. I'm one of the things I'll be preaching about this Sunday is sharing in the sufferings of Christ. I mean,
Mm.
we are so disconnected from that in our world
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
it's Sunday morning service is, I think Hellerman is the one who said it this way, or I'm paraphrasing here, but the idea we look at it as I'm going to Sunday service for my personal walk with Jesus
Yep. Yep.
so that and oh, there's so much more that could happen and can happen,
Yes.
should happen.
Yes. And if you approach it thinking, "This is about my personal walk with Jesus, and I'm just checking the box of, like, spiritual enrichment," then as soon as you don't feel like it was very enriching to gather with other believers on a Sunday morning, then you can disengage and think,
Mhm,
"Well, I could get a better sermon on YouTube, or I could read a more inspiring book, or maybe what I really need is just time with a cup of coffee and praying." Like, that's more spiritually enriching than going to church. And so what I'm hoping to persuade people of is that there's a lot more going on than my spiritual enrichment on a Sunday morning, and that I actually, in the long run, do miss out on spiritual enrichment if I disconnect. That there's God has gifts to give us that only come in and through the church, and if
mhm,
we disconnect, we're gonna miss those.
mhm. I couldn't agree more. I didn't prep you with this question, so to kind of put you on the spot here, I was just having a conversation this morning, with one of our board members, also a close friend of mine. We were talking about spiritual disciplines and spiritual practices, which has
Mhm.
been a strong emphasis at our church, but a tension there, and I think a number of people have pointed this tension out before, is they can become individualistic as well too, where we feel like, "Hey, I'm doing something more and growing in my discipleship to Jesus. I'm practicing scripture reading and prayer and,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever spiritual disciplines you wanna name." Now,
Yeah.
putting this together, did you have any thoughts on making spiritual disciplines or practices more communal or more familiar?
Mm, mm. I do think church services are one primary way that we practice spiritual disciplines together. We
Mhm,
pray together, we worship together, we sit in silence together.
mm,
Depending on your church, we do in our church, and I think, when people ask me, like, "Tell me about your spiritual disciplines, like, what's really important to you?" Like, the thing that comes to mind is, it's church. Like,
mhm,
it's me showing up and participating with other people in worship. That is the primary and most important spiritual discipline that I have,
mm.
and I don't know that that message really came through most of my growing up years. I think evangelicals tend to emphasize personal Bible study and personal prayer, and those things are valuable and important, but I don't think they come anywhere close to replacing gathered worship.
Amen. Yeah. That but we have to move against to gathered worship just feeling like a performance. It has to be something that the community is invited into. We're
Yeah.
we're
Yep.
we're in this and doing this together as a community, and you're not here to just watch.
Yes, and I think there are some practical ways to send that signal. If I can get, gritty here and maybe
Oh,
controversial,
jump in.
having the lights on during the service is one way that we make sure that we are seeing each other and that we haven't forgotten that we're doing this together. I was in a larger church visiting recently, and the lights, were turned low, and we were singing, and then the sound went out. The sound system went out, and they had to. So we were there for the end of one service and the beginning of the next service because we wanted to experience like what the demographic difference was like between the 2 services. My husband and I were like, "Oh, let's check this out." So we went to 2 services. So they're starting the 2nd service and the sound went out. And so they're having to kind of yell from the stage for all of us to hear, and then we, like, sang a cappella. And it
Mhm.
was the best worship experience I've had in that space because I could hear all the voices around me. And usually the sound coming from the stage is turned up so high that your voice kinda gets lost,
Yeah.
like it's drowned out by the singers on stage and the musicians on stage, and so you can't really hear each other. And without the sound system, I could hear that we were collectively singing, and I feel like everybody really brought their A game to that. Like, they were like, "All right, we gotta make up for the loss of the sound system," so they really participated vigorously, and I think that's beautiful. I think, if we are turning it into a kind of concert where it's easy to, like, kind of get lost in your own little bubble with Jesus, it might not be accomplishing all that God intended for us collectively.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. You reminded me, I before we started our church 5 years ago, I was on staff at a mega church, and
Mhm.
I was at one of the stream satellite campuses. We had 4 campuses, and the satellite, they'd stream the sermon in, and that Sunday, I was filling in for the campus pastor who couldn't be there, and the power went out. The power went out, and we had to make a decision, what are we gonna do here? So, we sang a song together, everybody could hear each other, it was really
Yeah,
beautiful,
yep,
and then I got up and said, "I guess I'm gonna have to give a message here." I didn't know what to do. I
yeah,
got up, the Lord gave me the words to say, we turned to a scripture, and somebody put a deer spotter on me, so that just so people could see me.
yeah,
It's a something that now I look back on the people who were there at that church at that time, we've laughed about it and talked
yep,
about it. It's a really special memory, but
yeah,
even something as silly as the deer spotter, that person had a role to play in that service. Like,
yes,
people were coming together and saying,
yeah,
"Let's make worship happen together, not just
mhm,
let's let a few people make this happen for
yep,
us."
yep,
So I think you're providing a challenging yet a necessary thought for the church as a whole.
mhm. And there's a time and a place for a concert, even a worship-themed concert, that I
For sure.
just feel like it the beauty of coming together on a Sunday morning is hearing each other's voices and seeing each other's faces.
Mm,
And if we can't, then we might be the service might inadvertently be forming us as consumers of entertainment rather than as full participants with
mm,
one another.
mm, mm. I
I
like
don't think there are any church leaders out there going, "Let's form consumers. Let's"
right.
but I do think that that's an unintended consequence of certain styles of services.
Yeah, I think it's good for us to all take a step back sometime and consider how are we doing what we're doing and why are we doing things
Yeah.
the way we're doing. So I think that that's a complete, like you said, I don't think anybody's out there like, "Ooh, let's create consumers," but
Yeah.
let's take a step back and say, "Hey, what exactly are we accomplishing with the way
Yeah.
we're doing things right now?"
Yeah.
That's great. So in the subtitle of your book, it's "Why the Church Still Matters." Yet you are an Old Testament scholar, therefore you spent a lot of time in the Old Testament in this book, which I love. I'm being reminded of a lot. I'm learning a lot. A lot of authors, when it comes to writing a book about the church, they would just jump directly to the New Testament.
Mhm.
Yet you have a lot of Old Testament in here, which I think is
Yeah.
helpful and
I think
necessary.
about 3/4 of the book is Old Testament. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. I think
Yeah.
that's about right. So what made you feel this connection was necessary? How did you make this connection where,
Yeah.
like I said, I just think a lot of people would just say, "Hey, we're gonna talk about why the church still matters. Let's jump to Acts chapter 2, verse
Mhm.
43 through 46, and let's break that
Yeah.
down, and that's
Yeah.
why the church matters and who we're supposed to be."
Well, I actually do to be fair, I start the book in Acts 2
Yep.
and at the moment of Pentecost and say, "Okay, the fire fell, and they're speaking in other languages, and they're all going, 'What does this mean?'"
Mm,
And to answer the question, "What does this mean?" we actually have to go back to the beginning of the story
mhm,
because this is a type scene that happens over and over again when people gather for worship and God's Spirit falls like fire from heaven.
Mhm.
And this happens repeatedly in the Old Testament. And so we need to go back and look at that so that we can see the significance of the symbolism of the day of Pentecost. So partly it's to understand Pentecost that we go back, but I also feel like if we start at Pentecost and just move forward, what we miss is a treasure trove of lessons about what to do and what not to do as a gathered community of faith. The Old Testament has all kinds of material for us that helps us to see what could go wrong when God's people set about doing something. When can we learn from their good example? And so I actually feel like it's important for us to go back to see that from the beginning, God is forming a family of faith. When he calls Abraham, he's calling him to become a family. And really, our faith in Jesus incorporates us into that family. And so there's really only one family through the whole Bible that is that represents the community of faith, and we're grafted into it. And so if we're going to talk about God's family, we have to go back to the beginning.
Mhm. That's good. I think that that's a we need that reminder today because I have noticed a shift of moving away from the Old Testament or just not mentioning it as often
Yep.
or not knowing what to do with it.
Yep.
And then even with that, there's been a shift of when we go to the New Testament, let's just bring up random verses and not even explore the context as much as we should. And I don't mean to be too judgmental or too much of a nerd here at this point in time, but I really like this idea of a continuous story that we're being
Mhm.
grafted
Mhm.
into,
Yeah.
which makes us say, hey, we need to dig into this some more.
Yep. Yeah, and I think you're right. People have moved away from the Old Testament in part because we have all these now YouTube channels and TikTok and social media that has have given people platforms to point out what's really weird about the Bible.
Mhm.
And they have shown a spotlight on some of the more difficult texts and been like, why is anybody reading this stuff? And and I think Christians haven't always had the right answers or good answers for these objections to the Bible and to the faith. And so some Christians are like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna unhitch from the Old Testament because it's really problematic. And if I can just move past and let's just focus on Jesus, then that sort of gets me out of those conversations." And I just think that doesn't work
No.
because people have the whole Bible. They're gonna see the stuff in the Old Testament. They're gonna hear about it, and they need to be trained in how to read it well. We
Mhm.
need it takes training because it's a cross-cultural experience to read the Bible,
Mhm.
and all the more so with the Old Testament than with the New Testament, partly because our sermons I think somebody studied it, and 80% of sermons on a Sunday morning are New Testament
Mhm.
based. So we just don't have as much exposure to the Old Testament. We're not being taught what to do with it, how to read it, how to make sense of some of the harder things. And so, yesterday I had a student in my office really wrestling with violence in the book of Joshua. Today I had a student in my office really wrestling with the Bible's laws against homosexuality. Like these are the questions people out there are asking, and we need to be ready to
Mhm.
have those conversations. And so I'm my approach is to spend a lot of time on the hardest passages to help people know how to engage them well, and I think what we see in them is so much of God's character on display if we're patient enough to immerse ourselves into the ancient context and go, "Oh, God isn't responding to me and my questions. He's responding to them and their questions."
Mhm.
And they're in a different cultural scenario where their values and their fears are different. Their pressures are different. And so if I can get to know their context, I can see, whoa, look at what kind of God we have. He does not ignore people's context. He addresses it. And he's addressing it in a really powerful way in the Old Testament.
But not only that, what I think is cool and that you bring out that does kind of cross into all of our contexts is this theme of family.
Mm.
That God is at work in a family and a people in their context and in our context as well. And so
Yeah.
there's this continuous theme of family that you're bringing out.
Yeah.
That's
And it's interesting because it's challenging to us in different ways than it's challenging to ancient people. So as modern Western Christians, the thing that really rubs us the wrong way is when other people tell us what to do. When we're sort of entangled with other people or we're obligated towards other people, it's an affront to our individualism and our self-determination. So to tell me, "Carmen, you belong to the church, and the church is your family, and you need to live like it," is like, "Whoa, I have to give up some of my freedoms, give up some of my preferences to belong to other people." That's
Mhm.
radical. But for ancient people, and I think Joe Hellerman does such a good job of bringing this out, and other books do as well, like reading scripture with individualist eyes is another good book that really brings this out well, that in the 1st century, people were fiercely loyal to their biological families. And the suggestion that they should belong to the church and develop family-like loyalties to other believers who were not blood relatives was very radical. Even just Jesus redefining family around himself, saying, "Who's my mother and who are my brothers?" It's like, "What? How dare he say something like," I mean, this is the most audacious and offensive thing Jesus could have said because he's dissing his family, his family of origin, which was like the ultimate crime.
Mhm.
And he's suggesting that his disciples who have given up everything to follow him are his primary where his primary loyalty is. And he's calling us to prioritize the family of faith even over our biological families. And, that was radical then. It's still radical now. And there are debates on Twitter that I have kind of cycled over and over again this year about whether our family should be our first priority. And so what I've just said makes me controversial
Mhm.
because there's a lot of people who think we should take care of our own
Yes.
first and foremost.
Mm.
And maybe the leftover crumbs are given to others. And so I'm like, I'm just calling it how I see it, folks. Jesus is redefining family around himself, which means to care for our own should mean to care for the church. And our biological families might even take second place to that.
Mhm, mhm. You even point out early on in the book how this kinda concept and idea goes back deep into the Old Testament as well. One of the things we overlook that I think you point out very well was that there was diversity within God's people. Early on, you have it's one of your little blur extra
You're gonna use the D word, huh? All right,
uh,
here we go.
what's the D word? I'm sorry.
Diversity.
Well, it's a good
If you
was that the wrong word to use or you
No, I mean, for some people right now, that word flags you as a Marxist. I'm not calling you a Marxist. I'm just saying, like, way before Karl Marx.
here it is. I have it, a multi-ethnic family. One
Yeah.
feature, this is from, yeah, page 29.
Yep. Yeah, no, I use the D word too. I say one feature of the Israelite community that readers often miss is how ethnically diverse it is from the very beginning. And so I can give a list of bullet points of um, people who were foreigners who were incorporated into the family of faith all through the story. And some of these we don't really think about, like the fact that Joseph married an Egyptian woman.
Mhm,
She's the daughter of a pagan priest. And they have 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and those 2 sons become the heads of tribal families of Israel. So they take Joseph's place in the family tree. So now we have 12 tribes, and 2 of them are half Egyptian.
mhm,
So from the beginning, the 12 tribes are not monoethnic, and we miss this. Judah impregnates a Canaanite woman, and their sons carry on the line of Judah. So the line that becomes the line of David that goes to the Messiah has Canaanite blood in it. And I think we should notice this because there is a tendency in the circles that are saying we should just look after our own. There's usually a pretty strong anti-immigrant settlement sentiment. And so I'm trying to show that the Bible actually throws its arms wide open to people of other ethnic backgrounds who are wanting to surrender to faith in Jesus. If they declare loyalty to Yahweh, so in the Old Testament, it wasn't Jesus yet, it was Yahweh. If they declare loyalty to Yahweh, then they can be full-fledged members of the Israelite community. So it's not that God only cares about one ethnic group. He actually has a path to citizenship for anyone.
Mhm. Maybe do you have some online lectures on this on your YouTube channel?
I have I have spicy things here, there, and everywhere about immigration. I've written an article about Ezra and Nehemiah that made it into this book, but
Yeah,
you
I
can
thought
read
that's
it.
interesting too.
You can read it on the Holy Post website. I wrote for them about how Nehemiah was anti-immigrant, but I don't think he's reading the Torah fairly. I think he's reading it selectively.
Mm,
Um, so I'm not criticizing the book of Nehemiah. I'm criticizing the man named Nehemiah, who I think was well-meaning but missed God's heart for inclusion of foreigners.
mm. Yeah, I remember reading that in the book too. I was like, "I haven't seen this before. This is so
Yeah.
interesting."
If you watch the Bible Project video on Ezra and Nehemiah, you'll see that Tim Mackey takes the same view of the book.
Okay.
And we were both trained by a Bible p we were classmates in college, and we had the same Bible professor who also had this view. So, this is not unique to me, but it is relatively unique in the world of Bible reading to be
Hey,
critical of Ezra and Nehemiah.
hey, sometimes you gotta step out there and say, "Hey, we gotta take another look at this." So I appreciate that
Yeah.
approach. So thank you for doing that. To shift the conversation here just a little bit, we're
Mhm.
talking about family, the importance of family, becoming God's family. And I know we hit on this earlier, but just to come back to it because I don't want to overlook it.
Yeah.
I have friends, family, people I'm close to who've experienced what you would call church hurt, and some of it very serious. You could go into the realm of significant abuse that's happened in the church, and sometimes even abuse that's happened in the church that then people try to justify as opposed to
Cover
just
up. Yeah.
saying it's wrong. And there's all different ways and levels and types of cover up.
Yeah.
Uh, what do we say to that person? I mean, is the church still necessary for them? Should they consider isolated faith journey so they don't have to experience that same kind of hurt again, whether it's,
Yeah.
you know, what some might call a minor hurt or what some may call a major hurt? However that works itself out, like what do we do and how do we walk with those people and what should they consider as they're processing this?
Well, the first thing I wanna say is I am that person who has experienced church hurt,
Mm,
and I wanna say to anyone else out there who has, I'm so sorry. Because the church is not meant to be a vehicle of harm. It's meant to be a vehicle of healing. And we have failed to live up to our God given potential over and over again. So the fact that you've been hurt does not make you a problem. And if you've struggled to connect in with the church or to return to church, I hear you and I see you. And and I appreciate your hesitation because I think too often we just like, well, okay, that's just it is what it is.
mhm,
And it's often those with a deep-seated sense of justice and like this is not right and things should not be this way who are most hesitant to reconnect with church. And I want to affirm that impulse for justice and for things to be made right is a God-given impulse, and you should not silence it or ignore it. So part of what I try to do in the book is show how scripture itself doesn't look away from injustice. It names it and puts it on full display. So I don't think our involvement in church requires us to just tape our mouth shut or
mm,
just cover our eyes so we don't see what's wrong.
mm,
Somebody said to me recently, I'm in a church a second scenario. So I left a church over church hurt and I tried again and I'm in another church and I'm starting to see some of the same red flags behaviors and I'm trying not to see it because I don't want to go through this again. And
mhm,
and so my word is, don't try not to see it. We need to have our eyes wide open. Now, we shouldn't be like I think there is a way of being, like, too hyper vigilant
mhm,
and, like, critical of every move a leader makes, and I don't think we should be hypercritical. We should have grace for one another and understand people have different ways of seeing things, different ways of navigating things, but we should not overlook mistreatment or abuse in any way or hypocrisy or, um, anything that violates God's commands should be taken very seriously. But the reality is most churches are relatively healthy and like that. they are following Jesus the best way they know how. So I think sometimes we can overplay the amount of abuse that's happening in the church because what we see are the headlines, and they beat like a drum. Like every few days, we get another revelation of a pastor that's abused others, and we're like, "Again, again, again," and what we're not hearing are the stories of all the faithful, ordinary pastors who are loving people, showing up at the hospital when they have surgery, and praying with them when as they go through hard times, and reaching out to offer support, and faithfully preaching the word of God, even if it's not like, wow, amazing, just like faithful. And I think those ordinary stories don't get told enough. So what I'm trying to do in the book is say, look, God doesn't ask us to overlook abuse or to just be okay with it. But he also doesn't give us the option of just disconnecting and walking away. He's calling us to the hard work of building something better. And so I'm hoping that this book will give people the courage and the hope to reengage.
Mm,
And I'm most encouraged, of all the reviews that have been posted so far on Amazon. I'm reading them all. Um, as of today, we're up to 58 reviews already, and the book's only been out for 2 weeks, so that's fantastic. And what most encourages me are the people who say, "Yeah, I read this book as a last ditch effort, and Carmen's convinced me to go back to church. I'm gonna give
mm,
it a try." And I've had that story multiple times from people, and that's my favorite outcome. It's so encouraging. The people who say, "Wow, this book gave me hope again to be
mm.
part of the church." And it's not hope because I've tried to, like, brush everything under the rug, um, or kind of overlook the hard stuff, but by looking at it and saying, "We can do better."
I s I think, yeah, to lean into this a little bit more, you mentioned how you've experienced church hurt as well, and,
Mhm.
you know I see you from a distance as well. I'm like, "Dr. Imes, she's brilliant. I mean, look at all those books in her office. I love her videos. I love her books." Like, I don't wanna assume things, but I feel like it could be easy for someone like you who's as smart as you and well-studied as you could to be like, "Yeah, I've been hurt by the church, but I still love to study the Bible, so I'm just gonna spend my time studying the Bible, making my
Mm.
YouTube videos, writing books, teaching my
Yeah.
class,
I'll just do my own thing.
and I'll do my own thing."
Yeah.
What makes you say
Mm.
this family's worth coming back to? It's worth getting it. What brought you back in? And and
Yeah.
I don't wanna put you in this position where you're like, "Hey, I don't want you to feel like you have to share parts of your story that you don't wanna share," but I do think that there's something really important here about the heart of your work.
Mm.
What made you say this family's worth coming back to or worth staying involved in?
Well, my Substack newsletter is called The Open Book, and I was thinking of the Bible as the book I wanna open for others, but also my life as an open book. So really, I don't mind sharing personally, and I will say that the last 4 years have been a particularly painful journey with the church for me because I have simultaneously loved our church so much and felt so frustrated at the inability that I have to serve it using the gifts God's given me.
Mhm.
Um, and this is something that happens often for women who feel called to ministry, that there are boundaries and lines in what I would say are arbitrary places that prevent us from using our God-given gifts. And my husband and I have just made the decision to leave our church. And it's a very weird time to leave a church because I just published a book on why people shouldn't. But we have come to the place, in conversation with church leadership where, as one of them put it, it's time to leave when you can't minister without causing division. And we've decided that it's the most loving thing to do for us to leave because to stay would force a conversation about women in ministry that A, our elders don't have the capacity to have right now. They're stretched thin with other things. And B, that would violate the consciences of some of our church members. And so it just seems like the most loving thing to do to leave. So this is hard and this is, there's layers to this. I feel like what the reason why I can't give up on the church is because over and over again God has ministered to me through the relationships with people side by side, even working on my heart to grow deeper love for those who come down on the other side of this particular issue. Those who are saying, "No, women can't preach because it's unbiblical." And I have a different view on that. And I have moved over the past 4 years from, "Come on, let's get this across the line," to loving people too much to wanna push it, and growing in respect for them. So, I have watched over and over again as God has met me, even sitting in this church and hearing a sermon by someone who has a different view on this issue, and having the Lord speak very personally to me through that sermon. I I'm like, oh, it's happened to me so many times I've lost count. I feel like when I show up, I meet God and he shows himself to me. And I feel like he shows himself to me through the friendships and the relationships and through the practices. Every week our church practices communion, and it's very inefficient because we all get up and we file forward and we take the bread and the cup, and then we have a person on either side of the table to give a blessing to those coming forward for communion. And it's slow and there's like a traffic jam because everybody wants a blessing. So we have to have like 2 full songs with all 4 verses to get through everybody coming up for communion every week. Why do I wanna keep doing this over and over? Because I think it's like when you have a compass that's supposed to point north, if it's put next to something metal or magnetic, it can be, like, pulled off
Mhm.
course, and the needle can be just imperceptibly off course that it would, like, take you in the wrong direction, and the compass needs to be calibrated. It needs to be reset so that it's pointing to north again, and I think church does that for us.
Mm.
I think showing up week after week, we might not feel like something dramatic happened. We didn't learn anything new. I rarely learn something new in church. I have 3 theological degrees. I'm like a professional Christian. I study the Bible all week long. So it's rare for me on a Sunday morning that I learn something I didn't know already. That's not what church is for. Church is for recalibrating my compass and reminding me that collectively we have decided to follow Jesus, and we have committed ourselves to waiting for his return and trying to wait as faithfully as possible and love each other as well as possible. I don't know any other place to get that, to do that.
Mm. That's powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Thank you for sharing.
I know there are others out there who wrestle with the same frustrations, and it would just be easier to be like, "Yeah, I'll just start a YouTube channel and I'll just do my own thing." And and the problem with YouTube is it's not bidirectional. I mean, people comment, and I can reply to their comments, but we don't make eye contact and we don't know each other in context of real life. And there are more trolls than there are real human connections.
Mhm, mhm. Mm. That's yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Mhm,
That's helpful for me, and I think it's gonna be helpful for a lot of people as well who are listening.
mm,
Uh, just to even if you're at that point of church hurt, yeah, if you're thinking about it to the extent of, "I don't need to try to go hear something I never heard before every Sunday." Yeah, that might be true, but you do need to gather around prayer with other believers and find a way to be ministered to in that community.
yeah.
And even
And
just yeah.
yeah, maybe I'll just add a word to those in who are leading churches that are complementarian or have lines of what women can or can't do. Please be creative. Please, I'm not asking you to abandon your biblical convictions. My study of the Bible has convinced me that God calls women to preach,
Mhm,
but maybe your convictions are different, and I'm not asking you to change those convictions, but I am asking you to interrogate them and ask, are we drawing a harder line than we need to, or are there creative ways that we could invite women into ministry? The Sunday sermon is just one thing that we do.
mhm,
And ask yourself, if there's a woman in our congregation whom the Holy Spirit has empowered with the gift of teaching, does she have a place to exercise it?
mm,
Or is she gonna be constantly frustrated because there's no way for her to follow God's leading? And I think we need to be more creative about the ways that we that we make space for people to exercise their gifts. And this goes not just for women teaching, but for anybody with any gift. Sometimes we get in a rut and we've like always done things this way and we're missing out on what individual members have to offer because we're not thinking outside the box.
Well,
And
it's a machine. It's we gotta keep the machine going, and so the
yeah,
machine going means we have to put this round peg in this round hole and this square
yeah,
peg in this square hole,
yeah,
and as long as we're doing that, we keep the machine going, which then hurts creativity and hurts
it does.
the ability to say, this past week, uh, uh, 2 weeks ago, I challenged our church to read the entire New Testament before the end of the year, and somebody in my church was so moved by that, she went and bought these Immerse reading Bibles. She bought 130 of them on her own and said, "I want everyone to take one home for free." They're Bibles without chapter and verses,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I said, "Yeah, get them. Set up a table, and let's give them out. Let's do it."
yes.
But I know some places and some ministries would have been like, "Well, first we need to, sit
Have a
down."
committee meeting.
Yeah, and we have to do all this stuff just to make it happen, and, I'm sure there's times where we've slowed stuff up at our church before too when God was trying to do something, but this was a moment where I thought, "Let's do this. This person wants to act out in generosity and empower
Mhm.
people by giving them the scriptures. Let's just do it."
Love it. Love it.
And
Take some risks, and I think we maybe think of church as something that we're building kind of in a vacuum, like, we're building the ideal church, but what we really have is these people in this place.
mm,
God gave us these people, and he put us in this place, which means there are gonna be particularities that maybe no other church on the planet will look quite like ours because we have these people, and God's empowered them in these ways to serve, so let's figure out how to make it happen. So
mhm.
maybe we're gonna have a car show to reach our neighbors, or maybe we're gonna have a food pantry. Maybe we're gonna have a sign language ministry. Like what is it that God has brought to you? There's no way to do it well and have it be a cookie cutter, because every group of people that God brings together is a different group of people.
That's a great reminder too. All of us pastors need to hear that because we so quickly find a model and then try to chase the model
Oh, yeah.
and put it in our context, and every one of our there are things you can learn from other churches, don't get me wrong, we don't wanna
Sure.
act like we're the only ones who've ever done it before, but what is working in your context for your community?
Yeah.
And because you have particular people with particular gifts, I think that's such a
I mean, and I heard a story once that's maybe like an extreme example of why it doesn't work to kind of have a cookie cutter model. There were church planters in the Philippines who were starting a church, and they were like, "Okay, it's time to build the building, and we need pews." And so, well, there weren't any pews in that part of the Philippines, and nobody had made them before, and so they got the blueprints from a church in the United States and had the pews made and installed in their church, and none of the Filipinos' feet could touch the floor because the pews were built for taller Americans. And when I went to church in the Philippines, I'm not tall, I'm 5'6". I would stand up and be towering over everyone else. I'd be looking down on everyone else. So the lack of contextual
Mhm,
awareness made like, importing this model from somewhere else that did not fit the materials of the context, it didn't fit the needs of the context, it didn't fit the people that God had brought, and so let's not be silly.
mhm. Right, yeah, that's such a good point. Uh, you've given us so much of your time, thank you. I have 2 more questions as we wrap up. First question, what surprised you most while writing this book?
Mm. I think when I was reading Joseph Hellerman's book, and he talked about how, the sibling relationship was the primary,
Mm,
most intimate bond in the 1st century, like, even more than husband-wife.
mhm,
That kinda rocked my world because what that means is when Jesus talks about us as brothers and sisters, when Paul writes to us and says to, you know, be brotherly and sisterly towards one another, they're using the strongest language possible
mhm,
to talk about the bond that they wanna see in the church.
mhm,
Uh, that was new to me. I didn't realize that the marriage relationship was not the primary loyalty in the 1st century, and if it had been, maybe the language, maybe the metaphors used for church would have been a little different, but the metaphors we have are really strengthened when we think about that context.
Yeah, I believe he points out that, for example, my wife's name is Kim. Kim would have been closer to her 4 siblings than to me. That's
Yes.
that's that's what he says basically,
Yes.
correct? Yep,
And if push comes to shove and, you need her and her brother needs her to do something on the same day, it's gonna be brother. She's gonna go with whatever brother needs because that's first priority. Your biological families, your biological siblings are your first priority.
right, and that was the 1st century world that Jesus
Yep.
and Paul were living in, and so when
Yes.
they use sibling language, they're saying that's the kind of loyalty and allegiance you now have to one another.
So this is not to say that you should like de-emphasize your marriage.
Right.
Like we're not trying to pattern our social structures after the 1st century. But what it
Right.
does mean is when they use these metaphors, here's what they meant by them.
Yep. Mm,
Yeah, that was a big surprise.
yeah, it's like one of those
Yeah,
mind-blowing type of things. Uh,
totally.
so where can people follow you? Where can they connect with you? And any future projects you're working on that, you're excited about?
So I have a Substack newsletter, as I mentioned, called The Open Book. People can subscribe for free, and I talk about all the projects I'm working on and share what I'm learning. And I have a YouTube channel. You can look for Carmen Joy Imes, and it should restart here in a few weeks. Going slowly through Exodus. I've been working through Exodus for 5 years, writing a commentary for Baker Academic. I'm 83% done with it. And, very excited to see that cross the finish line. Exodus is an amazing book, and I've learned so much. So if you wanna track along with me and what I've learned, you can check out the Torah Tuesday videos on YouTube. I'm on social media as well. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Well, we will put a link to all of those. I cannot wait for the Exodus commentary. As soon as it's available for pre-order, I will be pre-ordering it. And we'll put a link to all of your books, all of your work, and most importantly for today's interview, your newest book, Becoming God's Family: Why the Church Still Matters. Dr. Imes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott.
And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning into our season 3 premiere of Creating Space. If you have any questions, as I said earlier, please email me at scottlackey@newstorybuffalo.com. Send in any questions, comments you may have. Please subscribe to the podcast, like the podcast, share it with others. We drop a new episode on the first Thursday of every month. So we'll be back next month with a new episode of Creating Space.